And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Wednesday morning's flying weather showing, actually Thursday morning's flying weather showing areas of IFR here over the western interior with one band up along and just south of the Brooks Range. Another band here along the western Alaska Range extending westward there across the southern Kuskokwim Valley. And yet more here for the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, eastern and southern Kenai Peninsula up into the Coast Range here and extending across Yakutat into the northern Panhandle, improving conditions on down toward Petersburg, Wrangell, and Misty Fjords area, and some VFR here for Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, southeast Bering Sea, and then more marginal VFR for the central and western Aleutians and northward over the western Bering. And then for the afternoon, still some IFR here, just south of the Brooks Range there, some of that extending northward to the western North Slope, and some VFR in the interior, as well as scattered areas of marginal VFR, a little bit of IFR here lingering over the western Alaska Range, and also here over the southwest mountains, and IFR for the eastern North Gulf Coast into the Wrangells, down across much of the Panhandle, and some pretty good areas of VFR now showing up out over the Bering Sea. Still marginal though for the eastern Aleutians, Shimmy and Attu. And then for the morning out, or Friday morning, pretty good here for the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Just a few areas of marginal VFR. Marginal for the Alaska Peninsula and the southeast coast here. VFR, some marginal VFR and IFR over toward the border. Still some IFR here over the southern Copper River Basin and up along the Alaska Range into the Talkeetnas. A bigger area of IFR though for the eastern North Slope, central eastern Brooks Range, down into the Koyukuk Valley and then back to the west here to the Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue, and then marginal VFR from the northern Bering Sea with good VFR to the south. And still improving conditions out over the Bering Sea. A lot of VFR now. All the Aleutians forecast to be VFR into Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, up into Cook Inlet. Lower conditions here over the western and northern interior. North of the Brooks Range, though, VFR, north slope to the Arctic coast. And the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country here, pretty good. VFR, areas north of the Alaska Range. IFR for the North Gulf Coast and across Lynn Canal Glacier Bay, and then over toward the border. And for passes tomorrow, both Anaktuvuk and Adigan looking pretty marginal throughout the day at times. Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR lingering through the afternoon in toward the evening with rainy. A little bit better up there, marginal VFR. Marginal at times for Windy, marginal at times for Isabel, and marginal at times for Mentasta. Tanita, same forecast. Look for some marginal VFR most of the day. Thursday, Portage. Marginal VFR early on becoming VFR. Here as we get westerly flow, so be clearing out over the eastern entrance. And for the Chilkoot and White area, IFR becoming marginal. Freezing levels here, 2,000 feet up into the southeast coast here. Otherwise at the surface, Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and then back up into the southern Bering Sea. And from there going on to the icing graphic. Considerable moderate rime icing pushing into the northern central Panhandle up to about Yakutat. Another area of heavier icing possibly there along and south of the eastern Brooks Range and down over the Porcupine River. Otherwise, isolated moderate here in a swath from the northern Bering Sea down across the southwest interior into Bristol Bay and southwest Kodiak Island, and some heavier icing just south of the eastern Aleutians. And the jet stream, good westerly flow here along the Aleutians up to 150 knots, and it continues into the northeast Pacific and takes a turn to the northeast at about 120 knots here into the northern Panhandle. And 9,000 feet, pretty much the same pattern, but the wind's lighter. Westerlies here along the Aleutians, 65 to 70 knots, and about west-southwest, 45 knots across southern Alaska. Southwest, 60 to 70 knots into the central and southern Panhandle. And out to the west, pretty good westerly flow continuing here, 50 knots coming in across the Pribilof Islands, southwest 45 in the interior, and then much lighter up to the north. And then for the 3,000-foot wind flow chart. Easterly winds 40 knots there for the central Arctic coast, or much of the Arctic coast actually. South side of this low, westerlies 50 knots. Actually a band here of stronger winds with a trough swinging and rotating into the southwest coast tomorrow. 50 knots into Bristol Bay as well. Otherwise, the southern Bering Sea and down to the Aleutians, westerly winds at 40 knots, southwest 50 knots into the southeast coast. Turbulence-wise, with those southeast winds, look for moderate turbulence for the northern panhandle. Also, all along the southwest coast here, Nunivak Island, into northern and northeast Bristol Bay to St. Lawrence Island, western Arctic coast, considerable moderate turbulence there as well. And then also pretty choppy here and bumpy for the Alaska Peninsula to Kodiak Island, as well as the Pribilofs. Improving turbulence-wise here over the Aleutians, becoming light to isolated moderate into the afternoon.